So, on to the final portion of our morning. I will try and keep us to time here. I'd like to invite our panel members up to the stage, starting with Matthew Cook, Chairman of the First Nations Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Andrew Johnson, CEO from Gladstone Ports Corporation, Denver Points, General Manager Energy at Rio Tinto, and Patrick Hastings, CEO of Gladstone Engineering Alliance. Would you please join me in welcoming our panel? And you will have to share microphones, so share nicely. So I have a few questions I'm going to kick us off with, and I'll try and steer these to the right people, but I do invite all of our panel members to chime in as we go. Andrew and Denver, I would like to start with you just as you're big industry players in town. So how important is Powerlink's program of works for the success of your organisation and the future growth of the Central Queensland economy? So I might start with Andrew.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me? Yep, great. Good morning. Thanks very much to colleagues from Powerlink for the opportunity to be here. Oh, it's hugely important. Without safe, secure, reliable, affordable power, we've got nothing, absolutely nothing. And so for all of the industries that we serve and work with, it's absolutely mission critical, not just now, but in the future, knowing that secure, safe, affordable power supplies there into the future gives businesses confidence to invest for the long term. So hugely important. And, particularly for the port, as we're thinking about expansion in the port, growth in the port, not only from our existing customers, but our future customers, there's probably five things that are central to that discussion. And one of them is obviously having deep water, which we've got, and having lots of land and so on. But the importance of critical enabling infrastructure and power is absolutely fundamental. And so as we're hoping to scale up the activities across all three of our ports, having that secure energy supply, affordable energy supply, just is just so important.
Thanks, Andrew. Denver, any thoughts?
Look, I'm going to echo the same comments. I think, as everyone can appreciate, Gladstone is an incredibly important region for Rio Tinto. It's the heart of our integrated aluminium value chain that connects all the way up to the north of state where we bauxite mine. We have 3 active operations here between QAL, Yarwun and Boyne Smelter, and transmission is critical to the operation of each of those assets. They're all NEM connected and they all rely on access to affordable, reliable and sustainable energy. They rely on a strong system and great connection. And I wanted to also touch particularly on Boyne. So as everyone here might be aware, we are transitioning from our legacy energy arrangements in 2029 and repowering Boyne with a suite of renewable energy and storage projects. We've already signed up 2.8 gigawatts of renewable energy generation projects and more than 600 megawatts of storage projects. Now, not only is it critical to our ongoing operations that we have stable electricity supply, for those of you who are not familiar with smelter operations, we do rely on the grid having its 99% factor of reliability. We can't really go more than 30 minutes without electricity to the smelter. 2 hours, you're talking critical failure, potline freeze, damage that's beyond imagination, I think, for most of us. So it's really critical from an operations perspective in the ordinary course. It's also really critical for our repowering program because we are contracting these new generation projects. They're all grid connected, but they need to be able to flow those electrons through the system. So it is incredibly important to us. Transmission is a key enabler of the energy transition, and it's something that we're really excited to partner with Powerlink on, and we appreciate all of their support. And we're particularly excited, obviously, about the Gladstone Reinforcement Project. As I said, it is the backbone of the grid. It is a key industrial area for Queensland, and that is a key thing for Australian manufacturing and sovereignty.
Thanks, Denver. So I'm looking at Ian and going, no pressure.
Yeah.
Got an easy few years ahead. I'd like to drop down into talking about basically the theme of today around local Indigenous participation. I might send this your way. Many organisations have targets or commitments around local content and First Nations participation. So, what separates projects that genuinely build regional capacity from those that just create short term opportunities and get out of Dodge, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think there's two things. There's been a wonderful theme from Powerlink today, which is less about projects and more about regions. And I think that's fundamental to the thinking. But I think the measure of success is key. A lot of times, and everyone in this room will have experienced it 1,000 times over, we've got a percentage of local content we're going for, and we're going to spend this many dollars in the region. I think the true measure of success is whether or not you leave the supply chain in a better state than when you first arrived. So have you lifted capability? Have you enabled the region to become more successful and drive further outcomes for themselves? I think is a much better measure than just how many businesses you manage to engage. And I think that really starts long before the tender box, which is I think one of the big challenges, and I think part of the reason why the idea of moving beyond a project approach is fundamental, because actually long before you hit the tender box is when you lift capability. And then as businesses are successful in tender, you then enable that to be realized. So I think that's really one of the fundamental pieces in terms of measures of success.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And I wouldn't mind digging a little bit deeper on that to you, Matt. So, what are the most effective approaches you've seen for creating meaningful, along the same lines, meaningful First Nations participation and business growth rather than just those one off opportunities? Just from your perspective, if you could share your views.
Yeah, I think Patrick's summarised well about local participation, and that goes the same for First Nations engagement and participation in major economic development. I've had the privilege to talk to Powerlink executives for years now, including Ian and Dana, Paul and Gary previously, about the need to get things right. We're hearing the words, but we need to see more action, I guess, is a simpler way of putting it. But that place-based approach is truly what we need to bring to fruition better. And place-based approaches must come with local investment in the region itself. It can't just be the same old stuff and rinse and repeat. Otherwise, you'll see many passionate leaders, businesses and enterprise sitting in the room here talking about the same issues. And it's somewhat of an echo chamber if we just keep doing the same things again. We've taken a bit of a different approach locally. I wear way too many hats. One of them is as chair of the chamber, but also group CEO for our native title across Gladstone, Bundaberg, and chair of the Central Queensland Hospital. So quite often, as a true local, we hear these issues and we live with these issues and experiences every day. I acknowledge the good work that Powerlink is doing and taking steps in that in the right direction, I believe, not only around local participation, but also its First Nation engagement with traditional owners. And the early stages itself, but I think you've got to give credit where credit is due, and the work that Ian and Dana and others have overseen, particularly with those relationship agreements, in the right direction. There's work to be done, and I look forward to working with them. But to the heart of your question, it's that place-based approach. We're simply not just entering these echo chambers as well and throwing stones or asking questions that we already know answers to, but rather we've created a hub here locally in Gladstone down at Warren Street or Chapel Street for locals. And again, that was about making a place-based piece of infrastructure to allow industry and others to invest in. But again, that's got to be followed up with that actual investment, and not just the same stuff, but obviously looking at the quantum of these projects, the quantum of the proponents' investment into it, and making sure that social investment matches that as well. And if we get that right, I think you hear less questions from Mayor Ferrier and others that talk about these issues time and time again in these types of forums. But certainly to acknowledge the work that Ian and Matt are doing, it is a step in the right direction, but more work to be done.
Excellent. Thank you. Ian, would you like to chime in with the more work to be done focus?
Thank you for that, Nicole, and Matt. Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's, I think in some sense in the concept, we're all really aligned, moving away from that project by project view to regional. We're trying to embed that in our community and social investment, and sort of what Sean's announced today, because that provides us with a mechanism to inside Powerlink as an organisation, that funding is abstracted away from a specific project or an area. So we want to take that on a regional level. And similarly, I appreciate the feedback on both sides, Matt, regarding relationship agreements. Where that again a very deliberate approach to take a regional long-term view and I think the piece of work that needs to happen, and I know we've talked about, is we can drive some of that value through projects, but it needs to get driven through the operation of our asset. So that, that we have to respond as it's not a project-driven response, it's an organisational response from Powerlink's perspective that kind of extends over the life of the asset. So I think that's the work we need to put in now. We've got to think about how we go about that, because part of that for us as well is just making sure we have got a really genuine, local presence, and we're very connected. But we're also equipping. We're not deciding where funding goes, that we actually work with groups, like traditional owner groups and others, to enable them to make those good decisions about what makes sense for them as well. And so we're restructuring how we're thinking about, a lot of that work we're doing. But yeah, definitely more work to be done. I think it's that longer term view and the life cycle view of the asset that we've got to get into.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'm just going to selfishly ask one more question to Denver, if I can, just because Rio has such an incredible presence here in the region. So looking across industry, government, local businesses and First Nations organisations, where do you see the greatest opportunities for collaboration, and what practical actions, I guess, we want to hear around what we can do in the next 5 years to maximise that local participation?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I think the main thing is everybody has a role to play in all of this, and everybody needs to, ask the hard questions of how do we lean into the energy transition, for example. It takes everybody to play their role in the ecosystem to be successful. So we need Powerlink to build the power lines, to connect the projects to industry, to developers. We need developers to develop the projects, and we need off-takers to sign the offtake. Everyone has to play a part. I'm really proud to say that we're working very closely with state and federal government, and most people in this room would have seen the announcement in March that we are partnering with both state and federal government to secure the future of Boyne Smelter through to 2040. We are committed to this region, and we have a lot of work to do in making sure we work closely with the local community and First Nations groups to improve our impact that we have here. But we are very committed to the region. We've been here a very long time, and we're investing in the future. But I think the key is around everybody looking and going, what part can I play, and leaning into the problem. And particularly with the energy transition, it's difficult. We all know there is challenges with how it's got to be done. You need to invest in new infrastructure. It's a time where there's a huge amount of pressure on cost of living. There's a huge amount of pressure on the cost of construction. So everybody really has to lean in to find a pathway through that. In the next 5 years, it's the most critical part of the energy transition. We're really looking forward to 2029, as Ian said, with the Calvale to Calliope River line coming on then. That will be a critical date for this region. But I think that has to start today. And that's what people don't understand is, in terms of infrastructure project planning, today, 2029 is tomorrow. And so everybody really needs to lean into that. But where I think the future for Gladstone is, it's an important industrial hub. I think it has a great future as a significant manufacturing hub for Australia moving forward. And as I said, that is recognised by both the federal and state government in partnering with Boyne and looking at how we secure the future through to 2040. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities here.
Thanks, Denver. Jump in, Patrick, please.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Denver. I think there's a secondary part to that, which is at the moment we're shifting from project to project, or Powerlink shifting from project to regional thinking. But actually what we have is a massive cumulative impact occurring. And the risk we have at the moment is we're thinking organisationally by organisation rather than as a system. So I think there's a piece, collaboration often gets confused with the concept of engagement. And I think the big challenge here is actually foresight. And information. So collaboration really needs to be the ability to start sharing information across organizations and across a region. So we create a collective or cumulative picture of what's actually occurring. And I think that starts to drive a very different response to Mary's questions earlier. It starts to drive a very different response when we talk about social impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, but more importantly, delivery. So one of the big challenges we have coming our way in the next 5 years, we have an energy transition. We have several new projects that are starting to look at manufacturing in the region. We have the transmission projects. We had an Olympics occurring in the southeast corner, and then we had the general maintenance and management of the region. All of that is a massive cumulative impact, both on workforce as well as organisations. And if we don't start creating a better foresight of that and collaborating across that, we are going to end up in a lot of trouble very quickly. So I think there's also a shift needed to actually say, okay, what does the whole system look like at a regional level, and how do we start to work more collaboratively and collectively together?
I think Denver summed it up with everyone's got a part to play. Exactly. And on that, that's a lovely segue too. Would love to hear thoughts, questions, comments from anyone in the room. If you would like to hit any of our panel members with a curly question or seek some more information, up the back here.
I'm Bronwyn Schultz, and I work with Nev. I don't work with Nev, sorry, but I'll back him up on anything he does. From the Banana Shire. I'm a rural financial counsellor primarily, and I work with farmers. Secondarily, second hat is the Calla Dawson Chamber of Commerce. And commenting firstly on the community investment project that's been announced here today at $4 million, wondering how much of that is likely to even spill outside of the bright and shiny Gladstone, because it would seem to me that Gladstone could absorb that in an instant, and the Banana Shire and the satellite areas won't see a dime of it. And also, when you think about the importance of power to the QAL, Yarwun and the Boyne smelter, we're sending it to you. You're getting it from us. And when you think about the importance of what goes through the port, we're sending it to you. You're getting it from us. So do your projects, your places of work, do you ever look backward into that supply chain and go, we should be part of any community investment program in these small towns, these small areas, to ensure that that supply continues to come through?
Thank you very much. Ian, I don't know if you want to kick us off or... Definitely.
Just on the first part of that question, just about how we've been thinking about the 4 million, I'll pass to the others on the stage to talk more broadly about their businesses, obviously. We're only out last week talking with Nev on this exact issue. Your question about coming to Gladstone, I mean, what we're doing and what we are proposing to do is take guidance from Nev and Craig as an example. Who should we be talking to in Banana Shire? We'll be taking that approach. We'll be out on the ground. How can we put some meat on the bones of what we've seen in the social impact assessment for Banana to shape up what those initiatives and that funding can look like? And we'll definitely be continuing to do that. So I guess just your question, like we're taking again a regional view, and we're definitely going to be out in your part of the region working through council to get their advice on how who we best talk to and engage to kind of shape up what that funding should look like. So we've got that commitment there. I might pass to anyone else want to take the question regarding looking up supply chain.
Denver, did you want to jump in?
It's a good question, and I think it's something that I'd like to come back to you with on a more meaningful answer, because at the moment, we don't develop the projects. We are an off-taker, but let me come back to you with a better answer and engage with my communities team. We do, as our sites, we have a lot of local community and First Nations engagements, but I can't speak to the details, so I don't want to give you a fluffy answer. I'll come back to you.
I'm pretty sure she'll hold you to it. Any other thoughts from any other panel members? Matt, were you keen?
Look, I guess just a value add to what you're saying is that Patrick mentioned the word cumulative impact, and the reality is it might be Powerlink today, but I guess two key things are looking at the whole impact and both ends of the supply chain of where it comes from and where it lands. And there's two big players sitting here in the room today, both Powerlink and Gladstone Ports, and both of them are government-owned corporations, and without both of them, many proponents, private or government-owned, wouldn't sit in the room here today, and a lot of activity wouldn't happen. But I think the valuable question also to add to yours came from Capricorn Enterprise about looking at the bigger picture. And that's what's truly available to us to do things differently in this energy transition and in the supply of power to whoever it may be. We could do the same old rinse and repeat and we get the same outcomes, or it could be contingent upon these GOCs that we hear are owned by us as Queenslanders. That includes people out on your country and here on the coast, here in Gladstone, where we do need to see different behaviour, things done differently if we want to see a different outcome. We just seen the Closing the Gap report card handed down, and for the who's who, they run off up to far northern Australia to Gove or out to Nullumboy and to the Garma Festival and do what they need to do. But sadly for us, we live with the everyday failure that 1 in 19 indicators not being achieved is something that we can't live with. It's a broken promise of both sides of politics at all levels of Australia that continues to be celebrated each year. But for those of my colleagues that celebrate it, I struggle to understand what they're actually celebrating. And importantly, it means for all of us that we must do things differently. And to both, Sean and Andrew that are in the room with us today, I think, it's great to see that we have our executives out in the regions. We need more of it. But that deep listening and deep understanding about the need for change comes for thinking big about how do these social impact assessments not just be developed by consultants sitting in the capital cities that come in and do as they need to as and when required and tick the right box, but rather actually get into what is a bigger plan for Central Queensland, what is a bigger plan for Gladstone, Billow, Banana, the region itself that sees proper investment match it. I think it's good to hear Sean talk about 4 million coming today, and this is not a flog on Powerlink either. Powerlink's by one player, by one GOC in the region. It's contingent upon Rio, BHP, Shell, Santos, ConocoPhillips, the list goes on about the multinationals that we have sitting across our footprint that continue to underperform. I look to the paper constantly and see in Western Australia where there's big major social infrastructure being built by Rio Tinto and BHP in the West, yet somehow when we translate here to the East, it's all forgotten about. And this is the stuff that needs to be called out, and I think it's a kind invitation to look at a larger social impact assessment, but more so to the other points about where does rubber meet the road, where does the outcome and the investment match that we see not only around the country as best practice, but more importantly, building the future of the Gladstone and Central Queensland regions so that we can attract people. Your husbands, wives, workers, workforce and other need to come here. We need the social and human infrastructure to make sure that they want to live here. And that the impact upon us that are true locals that breathe it every single day. And having a little joke with Cale Dendell previously as a former councillor, I won't go into the joke that we had in reference to the region itself, but that's where the things need to change. So to your point, I think it's a very powerful question and a very powerful statement. But as a proud Gladstone person and born and bred here too, I've also got to say, whilst there's big money and big proponents or multinationals in town, the lived experience ain't that great either. And so getting that balance right and making sure the impact on both ends of this supply chain are managed well is a challenge that remains open for us all.
Thanks, Matt. Some important points to take away for all of us. I don't know, Andrew, if you wanted to add anything from the port's perspective?
Oh, not a lot. I mean, obviously, as the custodian of 3 ports, we take our engagement with our local communities, really seriously. We exist with their permission, and their support. Without that local community support and permission, it makes our custodianship pretty hollow. We invest heavily, not to the same scale as our colleagues at Powerlink do, in community investment programs, very much focused in our local ports and where we can to complement the investments that our suppliers, if you look at our coal customers, our coal suppliers, as you know, they invest very heavily in the region around us. So we obviously can't do everything, but we look where we can to complement the investment that others have. But also just as the CEO of the port, my number one job is to attract trade investment to this port to make it the most efficient, safe, cost-effective place to do business for investors and industries. And when we do that really well, then there's enormous positive spillovers back into those communities that supply our port. So in addition to the community investment programs we do, if we can drive new industries, new people here in our port, that will drive jobs and growth in the regions, in the catchments, in the hinterland around us. So I sort of look at that benefit proposition through both lenses.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm watching our Gladstone-based board director taking copious notes, so I imagine we'll hear from you, Liz. Any other comments or questions, new information that anyone wanted to share or seek from the panel?
Maybe just while we're giving the audience a chance, I just want to come back to this local supply issue because I think all the comments my colleagues have made have been excellent. And and this critical need to think in a systemic way or a systems way is so important. But there's probably two things that weren't touched on that I just, or maybe three things that weren't touched on. I just sort of throw out for the digestion of the audience. I think when I look at our business, there's um, five places in our value chain where we have to get better in terms of driving local content. A lot of folks, I think, focus on the construct and maybe the install phase, but the design phase, the construct phase, the install phase, the run phase, and the sustain phase are all eminently ripe for greater local content and engagement. And I think thinking about that end to end is very important, not just focusing as I think we have perhaps a little bit here just on the construct phase and then wonder what the heck's happened when everyone packs up and goes. So my encouragement for local businesses, if you're not already doing it, I'm sure many of you are, is to think about all of those elements in the value chain and where you might be able to intersect and engage. And we've got a couple of big procurements in the pipeline at the moment, which I can't really talk about a lot here, but we're really looking hard at all five of those phases as a way of attracting and retaining talent and capability in our region. Because for new growth, that retention of those skills and capability is very important in terms of attracting further investment in this virtuous cycle that I think all of us want to have. I think the other one I'd also just point of the other two elements is often we're trying to encourage, in a sense, big business to look in how can it partner by looking into the community and who might it be working with here locally. Encourage all of us, and I think, Patrick, your organisation has got a critical role to play in this. How can we as a community look out? How do we connect with the best people in the world and make it attractive for them to come and want to work with us and sustain their ongoing engagement in the community? And then probably the last thing is, and again, people have touched on this a bit, where I think we have some opportunities and roles like yours and others as connectors are very, very important, is sustain investment in training and education. That's the only way we're going to be able to break out of that cycle and growing that talent as well as importing it. So I know there's colleagues here from CQ University here today and others, but I think it's incumbent on all of us who work in this region to think about how do we come together, share our procurement pipelines, share our investment pipelines, share our workforce plans to the extent we can, to give those who invest in training and invest in education confidence that they can do so, and know that the people that they are training and investing in have got somewhere to come and work. So I think there's no silver bullet to this issue clearly, but just encourage welcome feedback, any of those thoughts.
And I'd just like to say, from Rio Tinto's perspective, it's very similar. We're really committed to this region. As I said, we've just committed recently to being here through to 2040 with Boyne Smelter. We do have a lot, like the local community is super important to us. We do have a lot of local engagement plans. We know we're not the easiest business to do business with. We are working on that. And I just wanted to make that point. We understand we're a bit of a behemoth, and our policies and procedures are slow and cumbersome. We are working on that. We're really leaning into this problem and we want to do more. We acknowledge we have a bigger role to play. We are working with people like Central Queensland University on various training initiatives. Capability building is a huge focus for us as well. We really rely on a local workforce. And if you look at Boyne Smelter, I think it's a beautiful example. When you go to site and you see the people there, there's 3 generations of people from the same families employed. We're part of the community here. We see ourselves having a long-term role in the community here. So capability building is super important. We have a number of apprenticeship training programs as well that we're running at the moment in partnership with many people in this room. So I think it's really important we do focus on that and that we all call it out. We all have to start looking at how we do business a little bit differently so we are more accessible and we can make more of an impact.
Thanks, Denver. You got a thumbs up from Matt, so you're good. Patrick, there was a lot of comments there around the role that GEA might have just in terms of that cumulative impact. And particularly, I know you were talking to Sean and myself yesterday about the education side of things and the work you can see that needs to be done there and the role GEA might play. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
How long have we got? Um, yeah, so I think from a GEA perspective, I guess it's really starting to position ourselves to enable a lot of that information sharing, and not just within a single LGA, but across Central Queensland. So really making sure that we're creating a safe space for information to be shared, and to create some of that foresight from an industrial ecosystem perspective that we absolutely need. So it's been great talking to Craig out at Banana Shire on how we can start to work with Banana Shire. Mary's on my hit list. I apologise for that. But I think also from an education perspective, and to your import-export piece, I mean, Central Queensland University and Rio Tinto have done some great things around cadetships, etc. Is how do we put those on steroids, and how do we not just rely on big industry to drive that skills growth? How do we actually enable our entire supply chain to buy into this and actually put it on steroids? And then secondly, how do we engage Education Queensland and the private schools into that system more effectively? And that's been tried, and we've seen many different methods that have some worked, some not. But how do we actually start to do it at a systemic level, and how do we actually start to really shift the dial and measure that effectively? And I think that's one of the big pieces, is the measurement of that has always been a big challenge. So investment doesn't necessarily flow in that direction. So there are lots of challenges, and we'll start to show and talk more about that. Probably one of the key things that sort of fundamentally changed in the last 4 weeks is that our industrial coordination piece is starting to move into GEA. So we have sort of the 7 big existing assets, including GPC and Rio Tinto, starting to meet across a whole range of issues, and we're opening that door up to both, I guess, the gas companies as well as to the other shires. How can we actually start to meet in a more coordinated fashion, not just for meeting's sake, but actually focus on the issues we need to solve for collectively, and really start to centralise as much of that information as possible. And then going to the social impact management piece, there's some wonderful examples in Western Australia of information sharing across multiple jurisdictions and organisations. How do we actually start to bring some of those learnings across, and put those into play in what is going to be a fundamental transition for Central Queensland over the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years?
Thanks, Patrick. Western Australia is getting a good plug here. Question down the back there. Hi, Emma Smith from Gladstone Conservation Council. I was just wondering what you think your role is with each of your organisations in telling the story of why such a big change needs to happen in our region over the next little while, why 2029 is such a big date. Like, we talk about what is happening, but I think sometimes the community just doesn't understand why so much needs to happen and why it needs to happen here. So I was just wondering, like, how you see your role in explaining that. Thanks. Excellent question. Go, Deborah.
Look, it's a question I get asked all the time in terms of why is the solution for Boyne Smelter the solution it is, which is a large-scale renewable energy and storage generation portfolio. And the reality is for us that there wasn't a future for Boyne Smelter based on thermal energy prices in this state. Just wasn't going to be economic. Aluminium smelting is a very marginal game, and we've got to be internationally competitive. And to be internationally competitive, we needed the lowest cost energy solution. It's not about a religious choice for us. It's good for the environment, which is great, but it was an economic decision. And I think that's something that people need to understand. It wasn't economic to continue based on thermal energy prices. So that means there is a transition that needs to happen, and the grid needs to be upgraded to deal with that transition. We're going from large baseload supply to a lot more intermittent generation, which means you have system strength issues. And that's why there's such an incredible focus on as older generation will retire and becomes more unreliable and has more performance issues, we need to be able to have the new generation to come online and replace that, to continue industry, continue jobs, continue manufacturing, continue regional economic activity. So I think that's just a critical thing for us to kind of make the point of, it was an economic decision for us. This is how we made the future of the smelter viable.
Andrew, you were nodding a lot there. Anything you wanted to add? Or no, you were just nodding? Any other points? Ian, did you want to add anything on that one? we've obviously got a fairly big role to play in that.
Yeah, obviously, in some ways, our story flows on from that. Part of it is about, like Boyne, that imperative to source renewable energy to maintain the economics of the plant. The other thing that's obviously an enormous part of that for us is the implications of what that means for Gladstone Power Station. It's 1,680 megawatts. From energy generations, it's like the drop the rock in the pond. The ripple effect of a change in that plant's operation across the power system is enormous. And so the reason why we've been so focused on that March 29 date for the transmission bill requirement is that effectively if that energy source isn't there, we need to bring it from other places. And so that the Gladstone project, which obviously you don't need to hear about again today, but the various stages of that work is just equipping the network so we can transfer that electricity into the Gladstone region so we can provide and sustain for all industry and including obviously where Rio's focus is. So it's sort of, it's a great point though, like that, trying to paint the picture of the whole of it, because people only just see parts. They hear about us with the transmission line and someone else over there with the generation project. And when you actually stand back and look at Queensland, there's things that are happening across the entire state, not just in Central Queensland, but elsewhere that are connected to the story of repowering Gladstone as well. And connection projects that we're doing far outside of Central Queensland that are going to make a difference in terms of supplying energy here too. So,
And just one thing people don't understand is, Boyne is 13% of Queensland's load. So it's a significant load that has a big impact on grid stability as well. So it actually plays a significant role in the system by helping to provide the minimum load for Queensland. So it's everybody has, that's when I come back to the role everybody has to play in the system. Everybody plays a role, and we all need to lean into that and understand the role we play so we can actually work together more collaboratively to get the best result.
And to your question, seems we could work harder on explaining that to local community, everything you've just heard today. So take that away as well. Any other thoughts, comments? Over here, Sarah. Sorry.
Hi everyone, I'm Sibom Tunzi. I'm here representing the Gladstone Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a business development officer myself. Just on behalf of our members, same as Patrick has alluded with GEA, it's more of a comment than a question. I'm very much interested in the building capability workshops that you guys have mentioned. Powerlink has mentioned them, and they keep coming back in that collaboration space, because I feel like what a legacy it would be to help sustain these small to medium businesses after these projects have come and gone. Because a lot of times we've got a lot of businesses, especially on the small to medium space, which is what the chamber takes care of. And it's an issue of confidence more than capability half the time. So I think it will be really of great help and a great asset to all these businesses if a lot of effort is really actively put in building that capability and their confidence to sustain legacy businesses and potentially build future legacy businesses in this community.
Thank you.
So I'm interested in seeing those come through actually.
Matt or Patrick, did you want to add anything from your perspectives?
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility as peak bodies or organisations to be building that capability for the region. I don't think it necessarily falls purely on projects, proponents or asset owners. So one of the key things we have started to explore is, okay, well, what are the capability gaps and what are capacity gaps? And how do we actually start to build that as a collective membership rather than purely relying on the next project or the existing assets? And that's not to say they don't have a role, they absolutely do. But I do think as a collective, we also need to be investing in ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a valuable statement, and I differ a little bit to Patrick in the responsibility of the proponents. I do think it sits greatly with them, and the investment needs to sit greatly with them. It's their supply chain, it's their standards they introduce from all different international standards to domestic standards or local standards that are required upon it. And if that's the case, then it needs an investment to do it. And that's more than a capability workshop on how to prepare a resume and other. It needs to be actually well understood. It's more than advertising ICN and go and see them and sign up. It comes at a cost. It's expensive. There's maintenance to your supply chain obligations that go beyond simply just registering on a portal itself. And so those things, I think, need to be, a little bit more of a bigger deep dive needs to be taken into it and understand the actual cost of that on small to medium enterprise and how we do share in that. I don't think it's a one-way street. It's everyone's responsibility. But if it's the major part of big industry coming to town, then they must also see that investment. And I think it's good to see that initial work happen by Powerlink and state development and others with capability statement workshops, but the supply chain goes beyond that, readiness, maintenance, and continuing to meet those standards as things evolve and change are much more than simple couple-hour workshops here and there. So understanding that and understanding the role everyone's got to play and the right investment is something that we do need to do a lot more work on and get right.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Sarah, did you have another one over here? Yep.
Patrice Brown. Just got a couple of comments, I guess, and it comes from, I was the president of the Gladstone Engineering Alliance for 4 years, and I must thank Patrick for the work you're doing at the moment with GEA, and certainly Alison Murdoch, a previous CEO, and Peter Masters, who are already also in the room, as are a number of board members and ex-board members. Gladstone Engineering Alliance has been doing an enormous amount of work over the years in attracting bigger industries into GEA, so it's wonderful to see it's happening. One of the things that always irks me at these sessions, and it's a very easy excuse for big corporations to say, and I know it's important, but not everybody needs capacity and capability training. We're not a bunch of idiots. We are successful business people, capable business people who've been servicing the mining sector and heavy industry in this region for decades. So just give us a break. One of the things, and Matt, that you've touched on, where we do waste a lot of time, and we have the Gladstone tax, so you talk about the Gladstone tax, is because of the costs that businesses in this region have to expend and the time and the torturous procurement process. And, Denver, you put your hand up there. It is a joke. It is hard to get through into the Rio system, and it's hard for businesses in this region, and it's set up for those bigger businesses. Powerlink, good on you for the ICN processes you've gone through. Not saying that ICN's the best way to go, but it works. It's simpler. And also for GPC, not giving you a spray, but there's more opportunities there for you to do more with business too. So let's not just talk about people have to understand and businesses have to be trained. Let's go back into your organisations too and take it on Matt's point. How can you do things better and work with us so you're maximising local capability? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. I don't know if anyone wants to respond or take it as noted. You've
I think it's a really fair point. But like all these things, I think it's partnership. Like for many of us, I'll just speak for myself. The procurement processes we have, I couldn't agree more with the feedback. But that it's what society imposes upon us. We are also actually just receivers of of instructions in terms of how we procure. So if we can get better in working with our partners in helping make that process easier for you, that's certainly where I'm coming from. How can we make doing business with us easier, cognizant that some of the goalposts that we all work in are unlikely to change? So how might we, the lens I look on, how might we support our partners so that when they engage with us, that process is as smooth as possible? So I see that as a capacity building exercise for both of us. So apologies if that language is being interpreted as doing something to you. It's certainly not our intent. It absolutely have to work together to make that process as smooth as it can be within the constraints that we unfortunately have to operate in.
Yeah, I think I would echo the same. I appreciate the sentiment and I understand, and as I said, we're working on it. We're looking at how we can be easier to do business with. That is a big focus for us. How do we increase our local supplier spend and our First Nation spend? That is a huge focus for this region. And we're actually looking at how we can take a more coordinated approach across our 3 assets here so that we can take a Gladstone-based approach to that. Because in the past we haven't. We've looked at it as a site-by-site basis. So I wanted to make that point as well, is there is a huge amount of work within Rio, looking at how do we become more accessible for local businesses. There are some constraints. We're still a publicly listed company. We have requirements. However, we know it's something we need to work on, and it's a huge focus area for this region.
Thanks, Denver.
So I guess echo Patrice's point. Somehow, Patrice, we need to make sure your voice isn't lost now that you're no longer GEA president. But I think the key point comes to it as well as we talk about multi-billion-dollar supply chains. Like quite often the investment from private sector and GOCs is in chum change. And it's the chum change that comes with it. And I say that because it might offend some in the room, but it's offensive to us being on the receiving end, having to do the good Lord's work on, a sniff of an oily rag, but beg for it and do reporting that's exhaustive and otherwise for a very little investment that we get. And if we're seeing the chambers or GEA and other playing these key roles in connecting and helping to build and maintain capability, then the appropriate investment needs to come to those connectors that actually help meet your supply chain needs across the region. Again, multi-billion-dollar supply chains, yet I won't sit there and say the exact investment that comes from them on a per annum basis. So these are the things that need to be called out and challenged if we're fair income about actually getting and seeing greater local participation in the supply chains itself. I know we're making good inroads to it, and I think the only shout back I'd have back to our councillors in the room from both Billow and Gladstone and the surrounds is maybe we also need to have a think with that work you're doing, Patrick, about how we have a Gladstone or a Central Queensland or a Banana or a Billow, plan better about who comes to town and what our expectations are. So when we continue to have these conversations on an annual basis, we're not talking about the same things over and over again. Rather, we're actually saying what is the appropriate, needs of our regions? How do you invest accordingly? And knowing that everyone's not the size of Rio, all these renewable energy projects don't have the profit margins that other commodities and assets have as well. But we need a better plan on this end to actually tell you how to come to town. It started with the Gladstone Roadmap, but I think there's more work of GRC and others to actually help others to better understand what our expectations are, because the human, health and social investment is not resonating. It is not coming through. And I know there's many people in this room today that know me well in all my capacities, and I want to make sure that I'm not sitting up here and dogging it by actually putting that call out. We sat there and experienced the hard efforts of coal seam gas or LNG here on Curtis Island itself. It's a great story for many of those looking from the outside into Gladstone, but the reality is we live here. We live here with challenged social infrastructure, including hospital and health infrastructure. We live here with congested sporting grounds and others, things that are key in social fabric to attracting people to the region. When we talk about local participation and First Nation, I'm talking about it from a traditional owner point of view, we want to make sure that it is truly about local. That investment means you aren't hiring people in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne and out of town, and they're our local leads. Let them live and breathe the exact things that we talk about on a day-to-day basis itself, the biosecurity things, even for the properties itself that are shared here earlier today. These are real live things that we put up with on a day-to-day basis. So it's timely for change. There's a new CEO. I'm just learning that Liz is a board member of Powling, and so I'm glad we shared numbers, Liz. A great champion at Gladstone, just like Patrice is a great champion of the region itself. But it is truly time for change, because I myself had second thoughts about getting up here today with Powerlink when the invitation was given, because we're getting exhausted and tired from speaking at events like this and not seeing the change, truly occur. So, the time is now, and Calvato Gladstone is bar one opportunity to get it right, and to start to get it right. But for Powerlink and the Gladstone ports and even Rio Tinto, when you move, things move for the rest of us. You are big multinationals, or you are very big GOCs in our state of Queensland, and you can set a standard that has a ripple effect through to your brother and sisters over in all different companies, and including those on Curtis Island. So, it's a great step in the right direction, but we need to be more bold. And even to Powerlink, I know you don't own the power that comes through that transmission network itself, but without it, we don't have a transition. We don't have renewable energy. We don't have baseload power for our smelters and others. So just think how powerful that is. Just think how powerful the multi-billion-dollar supply chains you have, and how that needs to start resonating better into local communities. And hopefully in 12 months' time, if we're back here again, we're talking about the material impact rather than what we should do.
Thanks, Matt. There's a strong theme emerging around that partnering two-way street. So yeah, well and truly take the points on board. I don't know, Patrick, if you had the microphone because you wanted to say something, or are you just hanging on to it?
Hang on for dear life. I think the one thing I'd say is a meaningful change that we made immediately, which is simple, and it really surprises me we haven't gone down this path, is we always engage at a point in time. And that point of time is just before procurement, as we start to get more certain about the project. I think there's an opportunity to actually engage more meaningfully well ahead of the tender box. And I think that will actually shift several of the conversations we're currently having into more meaningful and more impactful outcomes, either at the tender box or more broadly. So I think the call to action from my perspective is to all of the membership and to all of the supply chain, let's find the opportunities to engage earlier so that it's not the point of heat and the point of contention that it always ends up being. And I think that's really where, as a broader region as Central Queensland, we should really be focusing our attention and energy. We need to manage the immediate impact, but let's actually engage differently to drive better outcomes.
Fantastic finish, Patrick. I did have one question I wanted to ask of each of our panel members just to wrap up, and this probably picks up on your theme, Matt, about when we're here in 12 months, 5 years, 10 years' time. In any particular order, whoever wants to jump in first. But if we were sitting here again in 10 years' time, let's go with the 10-year view, what's the one outcome you'd most like to see as evidence that Central Queensland's been able to capitalise on this period of significant investment?
I think from my perspective, it's just securing Gladstone's place as the, an industrial hub in Australia, a significant area for capability from a local perspective, local communities perspective. It's a significant manufacturing hub for Australia, sovereign manufacturing capability. I think it has, and also the backbone of the grid, right? A huge energy generation storage hub. I think it has a very, very bright future.
Ian, do you like to, or Matt?
Yeah, look, I think sort of nearly an aligned point, Powerling's reason for being is to make sure that we are providing electricity transmission to where it's needed. And we don't do that for any other purpose than to make sure that we can support existing industry, existing communities, and their growth ambition. So we've got to get the fundamentals right. So 10 years looking back, that investment has to be leveraged and well utilised, and the metric we would want to see out of that is certainly around sustaining industry and industry growth, because that's fundamental. And I think then that in a way helps to support broader community and employment and outcomes. So I think that's particularly important for us, and obviously it's a fundamental mission we've got to keep our eye on.
Definitely. Matt, did you want to? I know you've touched on it to a degree, but 10 years from now.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I've had a fair chance to speak. But I think a healthy and strong local community across Gladstone and Central Queensland gives a healthy and strong industry base. But it's first got to start with the community and getting that balance right.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, excuse me. I just agree with where Matt's coming from. Just from a selfish point of view, from the three ports again that we're custodians of. In March, we released Strategy 2030, which is our decadal vision for the ports. So we have custodianship, and in that strategy, we set ourselves a target of delivering at least $1 billion of added economic, financial, and social impact for the regions in which we operate. So for me, success is that we do what we say we're going to do, we deliver on or even exceed that goal.
Perfect. Patrick?
I think in 10 years, internationally, our supply chain is modelled and envied. And then I think from that, because of that, we are attracting more projects, and the regional growth is significant. I think that, to me, would be the 10-year perfection.
Fantastic. Thank you all. I will have to wrap up there so that we can let you out well and truly on time. But can I just get you all to join me in thanking our panel for their time and energy?